and welcome to a special bonus episode of Epodibus Unum. I'm Eitan.
I'm Dan.
And we're very pleased to welcome back to the podcast our guest host, Allison Green.
Hello, everybody.
Woo. So, on today's special bonus podcast, we will be discussing why there's no such thing as conservatism.
Yeah, it's going to be great. There's no such thing as conservatism. There's only Trumpism, the best ism ever.
The only remaining ism in this banana republic.
It's the best. You know it. The news knows it.
Yeah.
The Times knows it.
The reason that there's no such thing as conservatism is because you can't point to a guiding set of principles other than flat-out bigotry. And as we talked about 2 Sundays ago, because they don't have any actual policy, all they can do is weaponize government against the most vulnerable and stoke the flames of racial division and otherism. They no longer believe in the Madisonian institutionalism set up by the Constitution and only believe in gaining and concentrating power at whatever cost. And because they don't believe in the Constitution, they feel that they have free reign when they come to power to change the rules. It's very circular. Power for power's sake, essentially. That's why today's Republican Party exists only for the right-wing media, for 4chan and QAnon and whatever else they have. We see, say, Merrick Garland and holding up all of Obama's judges and now confirming American Bar Association, ABA, unqualified judges. Yeah. So this is how we see this coming about on the federal level. But we also see it at the state level. So, for example, when Wisconsin and North Carolina Republicans lost the governorship there before they left office, the Republican-led legislature signed into law restricting the power of the incoming governors. So essentially kneecapping them. One of the legislators even said that they believe Republicans govern better, and that's why they did. So, as usual, party over country.
They're trying to lead as a minority, and they see the population changing. It's becoming more brown. It's becoming more feminist, and they're losing their power. You know, this white hierarchy is being challenged. The cat knows it.
The idea of conservatism has changed so often that it seems to me to be nothing more than shorthand for being on the wrong side of history.
Always.
And to act as a distraction and a thin veneer of rationalization or excuse for people to act out the most reprehensible cruelties and evils of which humanity is capable. So let's go back to the antebellum South. So,
it's hot in here.
People would say, yeah, I'm for slavery, but I'm not a racist. I'm just a conservative.
I do declare.
And then you move up to suffrage. Oh, I'm not a sexist. I'm just a conservative. You now move to Jim Crow. Again, I'm not a racist. I'm just a conservative. LGBTQ. I'm not homophobic. I'm just conservative. The forced birthing that we see rise in the 80s and now a resurgence here. I'm not a misogynist. I'm just a conservative. Anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim, putting refugees in concentration camps. Oh, no, I'm definitely not a racist. I'm a conservative.
I see a theme here.
It's just an excuse for bad behavior.
In an interview with Chris Hayes, John Metzl, author of Dying of Whiteness, interviewed a man in Tennessee about healthcare. The man was dying and lived near the Kentucky border. And if he were in Kentucky, he would have had healthcare. And he said he did not want it because he didn't want his tax dollars going to African Americans and Hispanics.
Wow.
Their interests and needs met by the politics of resentment in what Du Bois called, quote, the psychological warfare of whiteness. And again, this is why there's no such thing as conservatism, because look at the Christian right. Trump is the least Christian acting person that probably, well, maybe has ever walked the earth, but probably anyone can think of him on history. But evangelicals are his biggest supporters and haven't supported a candidate in the numbers that they support him, I think, ever. Ralph Reed, who is, one of the leaders of the Christian conservatives, Christian right, even said, quote, there has never been anyone who has defended us and fought for us who we have loved more than Donald J. Trump. No one. But they share the same racial resentments and hatred toward the, quote, other. And Trump has turned the right-wing dog whistle of Lee Atwaters and Fox and Ailes and Reagan into a bullhorn. And that's one of the reasons that they love him, is because they no longer have to dance around and pretend that they're not acting in a racist fashion. It's not racism, it's conservatism.
Yeah, they don't have to put on a show. It's kind of like the mask has come off and we're seeing the reality of how evil and repugnant they really are.
I always think of it that the son of Fred Trump, who was arrested supposedly for being part of the Ku Klux Klan, he basically took the seedy underbelly of America and he brought it to light. It had long been sitting underneath the surface and he allowed it to come on up. They love him for it.
I think liberals are often confused as, well, why do they keep voting against their own interest? It's not. They're not. They're defining their interests just differently from us. It's more important to have a white, quote unquote, identity than anything else, even if it harms them.
Because they grew up with that identity. So they grew up taking their white privilege and everything for granted. So now that society's changing, things are progressing, there's a lot of black and brown people on TV, they're seeing a world that they didn't come up in. They're like, whoa, wait, I got to deal with these other fucking people? Now now we have competition for a job. Now we have competition for this or that or a housing or whatever. And it's a big shock to them.
Well, it's also if you view the world, as Trump does, as a zero-sum game, then if somebody else has equal rights, then you must have lost some rights. And that's simply not the way it is.
And these people want power. And their power is coming from feeling like they are better than other people. And it's horrific and sad.
So, how did we get here? In an interview with Thomas Mann, not the other Thomas Mann.
The German one.
Yeah. The author of It's Even Worse Than It Looks, he said, Republicans are scornful of compromise, unpersuaded by facts, science, etc., and dismissive of the legitimacy of the political opposition. So the end of Jim Crow that brought Republicans and then the Southern strategy under Nixon, the aggrieved moved toward the Republican Party. The Christian right, and I think we've mentioned Paul Weyrich in the past, and Grover Norquist with his idiotic pledge, and as I mentioned on last Sunday's pod, the moronic cult-like devotion that so many have to Ayn Rand.
She was a nasty woman.
I mean, the idea of just this laissez-faire market coming to save everyone is anyway, sorry. I don't want to go down that rabbit
hole. The
absurdities
absurdities abound, but yeah. Move on.
Newt Gingrich and Rush Limbaugh brought the idea of a war on Democrats and, in turn, democracy in the early 90s. You then have that funded by the Kochs, the Mercers, and the conservative media, and the more extreme the position, the tighter the control that so-called conservatives and the Republican Party has.
They waged this fucking war.
Right.
And fucking Democrats have to act like it's a real war, because it is, and people are dying. People are literally dying in this country. They're dying in Ukraine.
And what are we bringing?
We're bringing a textbook to a gunfight.
That's right. And they're bringing a tank.
Yeah. And rolling over us constantly. I'm sick of it. And, most of the damn bases as well.
Studies have shown that what we have because of all this is an asymmetric polarization, right? The right has become so extremely polarized. We've talked about how they've moved the Overton windows so far that even being in the center seems to be quote-unquote left. With asymmetric polarization, what we have now is a rise in racism and plutocracy. We have demographic changes, populist appeal, or sadopopulism. And what we have is the Tea Party astroturfing, if you guys remember them. It stood for Terrorizing and Endangering America, I believe. TEA, right? That wasn't about grassroots taxes. It was about the wealthy using racism to not have to pay for healthcare. So then what happens now is Republicans go on and they shout about balance. Oh, there's not enough balance. But the problem isn't reporting. The problem is the Republican Party and the fact that they don't make good faith arguments. They are completely disingenuous, and they're trying to literally tear down our Constitution and our Madisonian system of government while gaslighting the entire nation into thinking that they're not doing it. Yeah. That's the problem. The problem isn't that there's an imbalance here. I can't have, someone talk about gravity come on and then some lunatics say, oh, no, there's no such thing.
It hasn't been proven. Yeah. It's a theory. Everybody knows it.
Yeah. It's like or talk that the Earth's still the center of the solar system.
It is. That's where I live, in the Earth. I'm the center. It's the center. Everybody knows it. The Times knows it. You know it.
The Earth is not flat,
Oh.
and I'm sorry, but climate change exists, people.
Okay, who let this woman in here?
One thing that we've read is how confused liberals were over these past few weeks with the impeachment hearings, and we could not understand why the Repugs were flat out denying facts and literally making things up. But if your only goal is to dismantle the Constitution, particularly the idea of checks and balances, and to consolidate power at whatever cost, then all you do is lie.
Yep.
You lie. You lie.
And you collude with outside forces like the Russians.
Right, because there's no repercussions to it.
Yeah.
It's now party for power, not country. Timothy Snyder, we also talked about last week, said fascism always starts with clearing the horizon of factuality.
Exactly.
These lies are then repeated through the media. Remember, the Mercers are the primary funders of Breitbart, and they make up these ridiculous statements that if we pay for healthcare like every other developed country in the world, then we'll become Venezuela, which, as they gaslight us, allows them to implement more and more fascist policies that the media is just too scared to call out. The media has no problem saying, oh, that sounds like socialism, but they never, ever say, hey, what is happening is fascism. Kids in cages is fascism. Starving people to death because they can't afford to eat because you kick them off of SNAP and food stamps is fascism. The racial discrimination that we have in this country is fascism.
If people in this country took their power and said, no, screw you fucking billionaires, we're going to tax the shit out of you. And if you don't like it, what's going to happen? There's only like a couple hundred billionaires and there's only a few thousand millionaires. They're not going to, they couldn't fill a city block, much less, you know what I mean? So their numbers, their literal numbers aren't there. Yes, their power is there in communications and commercials, but like there's not that many of them. We can win this shit.
We need to fill the streets.
It's classic money versus people. It's classic
Exactly.
money versus people. The problem that we have is that it's structured. Because of the way that our various systems are set up, there weren't any repercussions for Republicans in the 2016 election, despite the fact that Trump lost the popular vote by nearly 3 million votes and was still handed the presidency. The Repug Party also have a geographic advantage. Everything is set up to favor them. In the Senate, the average state is 6 points to the right of the average voter. And in 2018, if Democrats won by only 3%, then they would still have lost the House.
Yeah.
So because of this, because there were no repercussions, because they know they don't have to form the kinds of diverse socioeconomic and cultural coalitions that the Democrats do, the Repugs are now incentivized only to talk to their base, only to energize their base.
Yeah, and to that point of it being systematic is, also they're kind of like evil. They look for ways to exploit the system in order to get what they want, and they do it in a really dishonest and fucked up way. Whereas Democrats really come from a base of like just being a little honest, wanting to make the world a little better place. But Republicans really do come from a way of like, how can we screw these motherfuckers over? And they look for ways within the machinations of government to screw over Democrats.
Well,
They really do.
I think that's one reason why you see so many quote unquote so-called business people move towards Republicanism or whatever that is, because it's the idea of what can I do for me, right? In business,
Exactly.
it's about how do I get myself rich? How do I get my company money at whatever cost? And studies have shown that if you say I did this immoral act for my business, then you're excused at a much higher percentage than if you did not say that. So we have that ingrained within us.
That should be a segment right there on that survey.
Well, if you believe that the world is dog eat dog and it's a zero-sum game, then you're going to do everything that you can to advantage yourself. And that's why we see the Repug Party play to their base. They know that their real base is billionaires, but they know that they just can't go around and say, oh, we're just going to give these people your hardworking money, all these other terrible things.
They have the message.
They message, and that's essentially the backbone of the Southern strategy, which is gin up racial animus and use that to pass legislation to benefit the 1%.
I mean, I think you're wrong there. I think it's just called the strategy now.
I think Republicans know their base really well, and they know that their base is not all created equal. There is a certain portion of their base who will profit, and their end goal is to ensure that that group profits, and another portion of their base is just the army that they use to help their upper echelon profit.
What they do then is say, hey, the reason that you poor white person are a poor white person is not because of anything on your own that you did. No, you're completely blameless. It's because the other cut in line before you. They got these handouts before you, and the Democrats are to blame because they're the party that gave it to you.
It's the blacks, it's the Latinos, it's, these people from shithole countries. You know it. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows it.
So because we now have this structural bias against what I would say is actually real Americans, not these 1%ers or whoever, even though Repugs are in the minority, they know that they can remain in power because, one, they know that the Democrats respect the Constitution and want to work within the Madisonian parameters, but they also know how to weaponize and destroy the system, which Democrats simply don't do. We're talking almost different languages here. This is the Repugs' war on democracy and is their war on America. Essentially what they are is the HIV of America attacking and destroying our built-in immune system as prescribed by the Constitution. Trump wouldn't have been able to even get anywhere near the White House if Repugs ever even played by the rules, but they know that they can't. And if they hadn't spent years rigging the courts and solidifying a very strong propaganda machine, and now, as the Southern Poverty Law Center's release of Stephen Miller's emails showed us, we have white supremacy being pumped directly into the White House here.
It's being mainlined right into Trump.
This is exactly why they're okay with kicking 700,000 people off of food stamps. If those who were kicked off were white, then their identity of whiteness will keep them voting Republican.
Just one thing there, it's millions. It's actually going to affect millions.
So their white supporters, their identity of whiteness will keep them within that tent and voting Republican. And minorities who are kicked off, well, then they'll just show them on Fox News saying, look at these quote unquote lazy whoever, these lazy others. So never mind the fact that SNAP recipients either are retired or do work. They simply just don't care about us. And many of these people are on their third, fourth, or fifth jobs, just working. And Repugs know that either if they're minorities and dead, then that's fine by them. If they're working on election day and don't vote, that's also fine by them. The cruelty is the point.
Yeah, it's not a glitch. It's the whole program.
You ever have a pet?
Yeah. I love pets. I didn't used to be a cat guy. I was a dog guy, but now I'm a dog and cat person.
Oh, well, that's good. That shows growth. Did you know that while every shelter pet is unique, like some love a good game of fetch?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Mostly dogs. Mm-hmm. I do not have
a lot of cat fetchers.
Yeah.
They don't like
ones,
that.
But yeah.
They don't do that.
Others would rather snuggle together on the couch.
Oh.
Yeah. Now that I do have with cats.
Yeah, that's cool. Watching Netflix, you just chill with the cat.
Yeah, you're Netflix and chilling with the cat. There's a line.
And it's relaxing. You just relax.
However, there is one thing that they all have in common. You know what that is?
That they bring love to the world?
That's right. Pets are pure love.
But you know what?
What?
Right now, millions of pets in shelters across the country are waiting to be rescued and adopted.
Did you know that 44% of dogs and 47% of cats in American homes come from animal shelters and rescue groups?
If you guys are thinking about getting a pet this holiday season, make sure to visit the shelterpetproject.org. This ad is brought to you by the Ad Council, Maddie's Fund, and the Humane Society of the United States.
Rich Lowry of the National Review has said that while institutional conservatives may hate Trump, Democrats stand for everything that they oppose, and they truly believe that it's evil because Democrats are the party of the other. So they might hate Trump. So we're saying, like, why would you vote for him even if you hate him? They say because, as despicable as a person as he is, and this is why evangelicals support him so much, the idea of a Democrat is too much.
Yeah, go on, boy. Kill me while I support my president.
At a recent rally, they interviewed a Trump supporter who said they would rather be Russian than a Democrat.
There's my cousin Earl. He's a good gentleman, family man.
I've seen that before. So this further allows the Repugs to continue their war on Americans, to make us disenfranchised, destitute, and dead, because so many of us are the other to them. They have no policy but cruelty and hate. So maybe, at best, right, they get 40% of the electorate. But to make sure that they remain in power, they constantly flood the news with misinformation, lies, and hate to overwhelm the majority of Americans to feel cynical and despair, so they stay home. Just like we mentioned about A Brave New World a few episodes back. This is also why we hear them talk in such apocalyptic terms, because as Jacob Hackner and Paul Pearson, the authors of Winner Take All Politics, said, the stakes have become so high that in an era of polarization, the consequences of losing power is too much to bear.
Well, this is why I keep on saying how important it is to be bold and to be very muscular, because if it's the only thing that's going to break through, because so many people I know and we all know are just so bummed out about politics. Their whole attitude is like nothing changes, blah, blah, blah. But then you have someone like AOC who is a lot bolder and who is smarter and who is an amazing communicator. And she's actually popping shit off, as people in the Bronx might say. She's inspiring people. And that's what we need more. We need boldness.
Absolutely.
And that's what they're counting on us not being.
So here we are now in this very fragile state with every incentive of the Repug Party to continue to do what they're doing. Geography and our electoral institutions structured against democracy, against the Democrats. So the problem is, even if we did get rid of Trump, we still have the same issues. And Democrats in the media will be scratching their heads next year when, let's say, we get rid of Trump but lose the Senate, and don't understand, well, how's that possible, as one example. They don't have any interest in checks and balances. So here we are, and we're going to see this ridiculous McConnell trial in the Senate, which will just solidify us as a Trump dictatorship.
Yeah.
So we're left with the choice of, we can either get rid of the Constitution or we can get rid of the Republicans. And that is really the only way to save our democracy. It's like, as you were saying, we absolutely have to fight back. We are at such a fragile state now, and I don't think people realize quite how fragile a state we really are in. But the only thing right now is that's even keeping us in the small semblance of democracy is that Democrats took the House. And remember, that had to be by a huge margin because we're fighting such an uphill battle. Even if it was a small margin, we would have lost the House. So Democrats have the House. The incredible civil servants that won't put repugs over the country. This is also why repugs want to dismantle our institutions. Remember, they're trying to move the USDA to Kansas City.
No, they
or something?
did.
Whatever.
And it wasn't even Kansas City. It was like a small town.
No, because they hate not having poisoned food, apparently.
It's just unbelievable.
And the third thing saving us is the general incompetence and buffoonery of the Trump administration. Imagine how much worse off we will be next time. We saw how much damage the Senate could do with a Democratic House and Democratic president, and now look at how much damage is happening right now. But imagine if Trump weren't such a buffoon. Imagine they actually were a competent person.
I mean, they've done so much as it is, though. I mean, there are some good, nice, smart, evil people under him who are getting a lot of shit done. Yeah. It's really horrifying.
Now that we've identified the problem, we have to see what can Democrats do about it and identify what they're not currently doing about it. So what we're not currently doing is calling out the fact that they don't recognize the legitimacy of Democrats to govern.
We have to figure out how to start implementing consequences.
We as Democrats and progressives think that if we just state facts, then that will change minds. It won't. That is something that, I am definitely guilty of. I know we all talk facts a lot.
All the time.
But facts do not change minds, as there's one thing that Republicans know is facts do not matter.
Nobody loves facts more than I do. Nobody gives people facts more than I do. I'm the fact president. That's a fact.
And they also confused what America sees as facts. People are confused. What is a fact? Because they've created so much confusion around it.
It's just such a Russian-style propaganda system that we're under. They're not only giving us fake facts, but they're also
alternative facts.
alternative facts, but they're also muddying the waters with all kinds of bullshit. Like, oh, well, we can't trust these experts.
Mhm.
They're not good. Oh, this science is
Well,
still questionable. Wait, this is just a theory, blah, blah, blah. It's all
That's what we're
bullshit.
talking about with A Brave New World and trying to muddy the
Right, but
waters.
with a lack of education, then all that shit kind of makes sense when people don't actually know what the scientific method is, how these things are done.
I think it was Warren Beatty who said people might not remember what you say, but they will remember how you make them feel. Republicans say crazy, stupid shit, but they make people feel a certain way, and that way is outrage and fearful, which definitely drives people out. So we know that facts don't matter. We have to inspire people. That's what Obama inspired people. I mean,
Yeah.
several of these candidates are inspiring people. AOC inspires people. Another thing that we're getting wrong is we keep getting blindsided by repugs, and this is for two reasons. The first is the Democratic leadership still thinks in antiquated terms of trying to find this mythological middle ground, which is something that simply does not exist. And I'm not saying that you have to be extreme, but what I am saying is that if you're just trying to gather information and say, let me look at this everywhere and I'll just come down right here and hopefully not offend anyone. I mean, that's why Hillary wasn't a very inspiring candidate, because she was so poll tested on everything.
She had like 260 slogans that they had before they came up with her. That's absurd. Trump basically ripped off Reagan, and it's
Right.
huge.
Don't get me wrong. She would have been probably the most qualified president in modern, if not all of history, but she's just way too poll tested.
I mean, Democrats, what they're doing all the time is trying to look for a compromise. And what the Republicans are saying is, I shit all over your compromise.
Yeah, and then I kick you.
The second thing is Democrats can't think like conservatives. The repugs are actually very honest because they project, because the repug party can't actually think like Americans. Take death panels. Remember during the ACA fight? Well, there was nothing of death panels. However, when you take people off of insurance and you literally have a panel of people of private insurance that decide if you're going to get healthcare or not, that is a death panel. It's a classic Russian misinformation technique to accuse the other side first of what it is that you did wrong.
Trump does this all the time.
Yeah.
He's doing the same exact thing, but he uses it to accuse the Democrats of doing it.
Right. This is why one of the things I want to do is, like, all of these Republicans, we have to start investigating them from the time they're baby Republicans. That way, when they get into office, we have all this dirt on them and we just destroy them kind of at that baby stage before they're fully formed.
Look at Kevin McCarthy. There's written documents to show that he was getting charitable donations from Lev Parnas. What does he
Right.
say? I'll return it. Oh,
Yeah.
Right. We have to destroy them. And enough of this gentry bullshit.
Well, because they're coming for us.
Yeah, they're already coming. They've been coming for us for the last 30 years.
we're under attack and we don't recognize it and we don't fight back to it.
Look at Democratic presidents or Supreme Court justices are the most educated, have so much respect for the Constitution, and on the repug side are just unqualified, people who hate the country, who hate the Constitution.
And one guy was just lazy, they said.
We care about the law, we care about the Constitution, and they just care about party adhesion. That's all that they care about.
The only thing the Republicans do with the Constitution is use it as toilet paper.
So, how do we fix this? There are two categories of fixing it, institutionally and with messaging. So, institutionally, we need to fix the Senate and make sure every American is represented. That means Washington, D.C., Puerto Rico, Guam, the Virgin Islands, because there's no reason why Wyoming should have 77 times more power in the Senate than California. It's completely undemocratic. And once we do that, we also have to do away with the filibuster.
I mean, look at Puerto Rico. Look at what happened to Puerto Rico. Don't they deserve to have a voice?
We need to end voter suppression and gerrymandering, which also will not happen unless we take back the House and the Senate and the presidency.
Racist voter suppression.
Right. Sorry, racist voter suppression. Voter suppression is not just turning people away at the polls and voter ID. It's also the voter roll purges.
Yep.
we need to make election day a holiday or put it on a Saturday.
I mean, people should not have to make a choice whether they're going to miss the day's work of pay or have a voice for their whole future.
The House has passed over 400 bills that Mitch McConnell has
The
killed.
do-nothing Democrats
Yeah.
did 400? Are you sure?
Yeah.
The Mitch McConnell graveyard
Yeah.
is sitting there.
Moscow Mitch.
And then he has the hypocrisy to actually sit there and claim that Dems are not doing anything when he's actually sitting on the laws that they've passed.
Yeah, I mean, that's why he's Moscow Mitch, because it benefits them and it benefits Russia. Again, they're following their incentives. They have no reason to pass new legislation. Their only incentive is to stack the judiciary so that way, if they ever do lose the Senate, which God willing they do, and laws are passed in state legislatures and within the Congress, they have biased, unqualified judges that can nullify them.
And as you said, it's about keeping their power. I mean, many of us actually recognize that Trump is fighting for the fact that he would be put away the minute he's no longer in power.
Yeah.
Well, pretty much the Republicans are coming from the same exact position. If they lose power, they know that they're dead.
Yeah. So, and that's why they're not interested in passing laws, because they're not interested in helping people. And Dems need to wake up and understand how important the judiciary is, at least how important it is in this current moment in history, unless we have some sort of structural change.
These are judges for life.
Yeah. So some other institutional fixes are smaller congressional districts so that representatives can build better relationships with their constituents, and also multi-member districts. And of course, ranked choice voting, which is something that I've been a fan of. I always thought that was a good idea.
I'm into the multi thing. I've been into it since the 80s, guys.
And don't forget, we have to take money out of politics.
I mean, that's really the root of all this evil, too.
Yeah.
So on the messaging front, the way that we fix this is, first, people are in the middle because they are looking for an answer. People don't spend their time researching every minute detail. I cannot say this loud enough, often enough. I want everybody to shout this. They are not looking for a middle solution. They haven't sat down and examined all angles. They're in the middle because they can be persuaded. And because the Dems have given up and can't articulate their own position half the time, that leaves them on the defensive, and they misread the quote-unquote middle as being Republican light. Then, of course, people are going to choose the genuine thing because the other side, the Repugs, have filled that void. They're not going to take Republican light over a genuine Republican that actually says this is what I believe, as detrimental as it is. We have to play to hope and to aspirational dreams. They play to fear and hate and racism. So if we don't fill that, they will.
If we raise our voices and demand things, we can actually save a democracy. So why wouldn't we do that?
I don't know, but Democrats have to make strong cases and to stop being afraid of what they believe in, of believing in what's right.
Yeah.
You know, there's no magic to the good messaging of people like Bernie or Elizabeth or AOC. They genuinely believe in what's right, and they're not afraid to stand up for it.
And we need to say that the right are wrong.
The second point of messaging, we must address what is happening and call it out. We must do this all the time. Too often, progressives and Democratic groups are too afraid to talk about how we're being gaslit into racial prejudices. We have to call out the racism of the other side. We cannot worry about, I might lose a swing voter. Bullshit. That is absolute bullshit. If you articulate your position strong enough and well enough, they will come around.
Political correctness is not going to win the day, guys.
Yeah, and these swing voters are generally, by and large, kind of not that informed. That's why they're able to kind of sway with the wind and stuff. So that's why that's why it's so important to constantly message boldly in bold fonts so that it gets through to people that just aren't really paying that much attention.
I mean, basically the Republicans, what they do in terms of messaging is shock value. And we can actually also go with shock value, but let's shock them with the truth and how scary the freaking truth is.
And put that in relatable terms, right? In individualized terms. You cannot talk about Medicare for all or gun control laws without addressing the racial politics behind the opposition to that. And simply appealing to rational self-interest does not work. It does not work. And then telling conservatives why conservative policies don't work makes conservatives double down. It's the backfire effect. So we have to present an alternative to that. Also, because of social, economic, and racial issues are so interconnected to people who have some implicit or explicit racial biases, and because socioeconomic and racial issues are so interconnected, it's the politics of racial resentment that affect most political decision making. We can't just say, oh, well, not giving healthcare to all affects you as well. That's not a message that's going to get through. This is because if subconsciously people are connecting any public good to the other, whoever the other is that the right-wing media indoctrinates them to, then it's foolish to think that you can convince people without mentioning race, because without mentioning race, it allows the person to remain in this bubble where they don't have to confront their implicit or explicit biases, and it stays subconscious and affects their decision making. We must address it to fill in that void and say something like, for 50 years, these people have manipulated us, right? Not you, it's us, all of us, to make a connection between people in need, working Americans, and this idea of an unjustified others that are taking things from you. They're telling us to look down at those who need a leg up and not to look up at their boots that are on our throats. Democrats believe in community and democracy. Remember, don't use the word government. It is democracy. We believe in democracy. Unfortunately, government has been smeared by the right. So Democrats believe in community, democracy, and coalition building. These are factors that also appeal to Republicans. That is one way that we can influence people. There is no us and them. They're only Americans. And lastly, a good message has to be so good that the base wants to repeat it.
Catchy.
That's it for this special bonus episode of E Potibus Unum. Thank you so much, Allison and Dan.
Yeah, and hopefully this was informative to you.
Yeah. So as always, you can find in the show notes, please go to anchor.fm/epotibusunum and become a sponsor. We really appreciate any help that you can give. And if you or someone you know is interested in helping us out, we could use an intern. Or if you think that there's a topic, please email us. You can reach us at epotibus at Twitter or epotibus@gmail.com. Remember, messaging is only half the battle and mobilization is the other half. Please remember to call your congressperson. We have that link in the show notes as well.
Make your voices heard, people.
Get off your couch and get out there and find out who your representatives. Go to their office. Say, I want to make some fucking change. I'm tired of this bullshit. What can I do? They'll find something for you to do. Go find organizations. You can find them on Facebook. Just do it.
Tell them Shirley Eagle sent you. Shirley
Eagle sent you.
Yeah, that's our mascot.
She's our mascot.
We got to take to the streets, people. And sometimes saving a democracy, the first step is putting on your sneakers.
Have a good week. We'll see you guys on Sunday.